7 o'clock and join me in saying pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start our meeting, Trustee Larry Williams, mother just passed, and Mayor Stater, Ken Peterson. We have a moment of silence, please. Do we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Brown.
Present.
Trustee Clark.
President.
Trustee Lynch.
Present.
Trustee Roll. Trustee Williams.
Present.
Trustee Taylor, I'm sorry.
Trustee Clark, just wanted to, Eric Gardner asked me to say a couple of words. As you know, he's joined tonight, he's been joined at the last couple of meetings. He's out, he's doing fine. He's in charge here, he's in town, he's in the village, he's spoken with me, he's spoken with Kevin today, and Brian as well, so he's out, he's available. He was gonna try to make the next meeting, but just felt that discretion is the better part of value, and he'll be here for the next one.
I have a motion for joining the Zoom meeting.
So moved.
No. Trustee Williams, Trustee Taylor. Trustee Williams.
Aye.
Trustee Taylor. Yes. Trustee Roll. Trustee Lynch.
Yes.
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Trustee Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. John, do we continue to vote for Zoom? I mean, no one is speaking. Why do we vote for it? It's not here. I think it's on the agenda, just amongst the people, but we really don't need to vote for it, but there's no harm in doing it.
And I do believe that the mayor is going to join us also. Presentation of the minutes from the regular board meeting, September 3rd.
Moved by Trustee Roll, second by Trustee Williams. Any discussion, corrections?
I just have a slight correction. On page 6, excuse me, it says that I wanted clarity on how the project was originally 2.2 million and now it's 1.9. It's actually the opposite. The spreadsheet read that 1.88397, like almost 1.9, was approved. However, there was an amount on the spreadsheet because it was an Excel spreadsheet that added an equal 2.2 million. Even though former trustee Hart corrected that, the way the minutes are reading now is I had a concern that it was originally 2.2, went down. In actuality, I had a concern that it was 1.8 approved and it looked like it went up. So I'd like the minutes to reflect that. And also that we did not approve the $336,900, even though the reporter said that. We did not approve that last time. I like that reflected.
Okay, correct.
I think Clerk Williams
the provision there specifically with the approval of contracts is that the language said we approved a little over 300,000 in contracts, but in fact, we just approved the vendor list that totaled to the 300,000.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we got a motion to amend the minutes.
There's a motion to amend the minutes.
Yeah.
Motion to amend the minutes. I said the motion. I motioned to amend the minutes.
So trustee Brown and trustee Roll?
Right. The first and second is good. Is it okay for you to change your motion?
Okay. Okay. Trustee Williams?
Aye.
Trustee Taylor?
Yes.
Trustee Roll? Trustee Lynch?
Yes. Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Brown?
Yes. Motion
This
passed.
is a report. Brian Jensen.
Okay, first I'd like to comment, there is a check, or there, on page 18 of the packet, the amount to Wells Fargo inaccurately reported on there. It's showing for $21,841.84. It should have read $2,184.84, which is going to change both the Glen Woody numbers when I get to it and then the total funds. So bills payable on September 16th, corporate was $80,642.63. Motor fuel tax, $45,818.33. Water and sewer, $138,612.04. TIF Holbrook Road, $5,195. Glenwoody Golf Course, the corrected number should be $39,170.41. TIF Halsted North would be $173,759.00. And Halsted South, $37,719.00. The total of all funds then would be $520,916.41 with that change in it.
Do we have a motion to accept the bills with the changes?
Trustee Taylor?
Do we have a second?
Second. Trustee Taylor, trustee Brown?
Call the roll, please.
Trustee Brown?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Lynch?
Yes.
Trustee Roll? Trustee Taylor?
Yes.
Trustee Williams?
Aye.
Passed.
For the payroll, there's also a slight update here on the vendor checks. When I get to it, it's really $2,805.48, but I'll go through that and cover that. It did not change the total. This was just incorrect number in the body. So payroll as of the date of September 6th, corporate was $135,637.20. Sewer and water, $17,085.57. Holiday pay, $3,582.16. Paid on call, $11,548.13. Elected positions, $6,587.56. Glenwoody Golf Course at $36,687.50. And then again, here's where the changes, vendor checks should have been $2,805.48. Overtime, police overtime was at $5,106.13. with reimbursable overtime at $1,467.48. Sewer and water, $848.69. Public Works, $456.93. Economic Development, the stipend was $461.54. Admin stipend, $1,367.31, for a total payroll of $222,172.20.
Could I have a motion to accept the payroll with the corrections? Second.
Trustee Taylor, trustee Williams. Trustee Williams.
Aye.
Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Trustee Roll. Trustee Lynch.
Yes.
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Trustee Brown.
Yes.
Payroll passed.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I was looking through some previous emails and I had a question when it was payable. Brian, when did we transfer, when did we make it, was there any recent tip transfers? Because I see that the north, tip Austin North, looks like there was a transfer there.
That I'm aware of, we didn't make one, and I'd have to just double check that, but I don't recall making a TIF transfer.
Because it's saying 173,759 here, and Fergus tip balance as of August 31st, there was only $90,967 there. And I specifically remember requesting that all tip transfers come to the board before transfers. So there's been some movement, but nothing's come before the board for approval for a transfer. Adam, do you have an idea of what happened? I don't want to impede the meeting, we can come back to it, but the board asked that tip transfers come before us for approval so that we can.
Second installment tax bills were due, I think, August 1st.
But that's not, I appreciate, I know, yes, John.
So some of that money might have just come into the tip through the normal tax process without it being transferred. I don't know.
Yeah, can we circle back out before? But I noticed that when I got the amended agenda, and I know we didn't approve any transfers, so I'd like to know what happened there. But we can move on.
I mean, I know it was a discussion, but I don't think we mentioned
What?
about the TIF transfers, that once the board approves the actual expenditure, then.
But the board didn't approve the expenditure. In fact, at the last meeting, when there was a request for the fire department for TIF funds, that didn't happen because that had to come back to the board for approval for that transfer. So,
Why we approved the vendors that we did at the last meeting?
with the accounts that, where the money exists, I just want to know, be sure that we're moving money to the appropriate TIF and that it's being used for that specific reason, because the TIF, for now, we're without a treasurer, so we're not getting TIF balance reports. And as you see, it's difficult to identify what happened. So I just want to know where the transfer went.
So I can go back and check, but you're still getting balances for all the tips. When we run the report for the bank balances, that also includes the tips.
I didn't see a TIF report in this packet.
Yeah,
I see it in the
you get it
budget.
you get it once a month. So you probably had it at the last meeting, Brian, if I remember correctly.
No, it's actually in this board deck. I forget which page it is, but it's after the paywalls. Because I don't have mine in the order anymore, but it's showing right now at August 31st, Halsted North at $90,967, but then when I did this report, it is through September 12th, and it has it at $27,227, and that's because of some of the expenditures that we had in that TIF. So far we haven't transferred anything that I'm aware of, and I can just go double check with the bank accounts and get back with you, Deanna.
Thank you, but I'm looking through the packet, I don't see the TIF report, but I'll take your word for it, but I don't see it.
It's right behind cash requirements report. It's right behind the cash requirements, right before the police department report.
So if what you're saying is correct, Brian, then that says September ending is $27,227 for TIF Austin North. And this TIF Austin North on this report is saying $173,000.
You're correct. So we will need a transfer in order to accommodate those payables.
What? Okay, what's all that?
At this time, we move open to the meeting, open to the public to step forward, state your name and address, and what you have to say to us.
Hello, my name is Michelle Mosley. I live at 337 Hopper. I have a couple questions. More than a couple. The budget that is being reviewed today is not being voted, correct? Okay. And the budget that's being reviewed today is the budget that was attached to the board packet as of this month, correct? Okay. Based on that, these are some of the things that I would like to see addressed before the budget is actually voted on. That budget offered some unaudited numbers for 2024. And I realize they're unaudited, but that doesn't mean they have to be real low. In the TIF balances, I looked at the board packet from June of last year, and I looked at the TIF balances. I took our unaudited revenue numbers for 2024, our unaudited budgeted expenses for 2024, not budgeted, I'm sorry, unaudited actual expenses for 2024. And I added the revenue, subtracted the expenses, and came up with a unaudited balance. And then I looked at the packet for June the 18th of this year and looked at the actual bank balances as of May 17th, which is closest we could get to the end of the fiscal year. And the delta for all of our TIFs is just under $500,000 unaccounted for. And I realize these numbers are unaudited, but that's a big difference. So before we vote on this budget, I think we need to kind of get at least those numbers figured out. The second thing is in the Fund 1.081.8105. It says we're going to get a reimbursement for MRF for $210,400. What is IMRF and why are they reimbursing? I'm sorry?
It's not a reimbursement. You levy for the IMRF tax levy, so we pay the expenditures out of the general fund, and then the IMRF fund reimburses back to the general.
And that's the same thing for fire?
I think it's
So, is there a reason why they're not being paid where they're supposed to be paid? So that we wouldn't be getting reimbursed, because we don't normally get reimbursed for taxes.
Well, hey, before I came on, I consolidated the line items in the tax levy this past December. So going forward, it's gonna be consolidated into each one. But historically, the bills is always levied for IMRF FICA under the tax levy. Because you get line items on the tax levy. That goes back to like 1984, when IMRF wasn't funded, there was a state mandate to have a tax levy. Village is pretty much fully funded with IMRF, so you don't need a tax levy.
So, looking at that budget and looking at the previous years, that money came back to us before, but was never,
It never came back from you, it was part of the tax levy, it was segregated into a separate fund. And then the employees are in their actual funds, so you have to take it from one fund and put it back into the other fund. It's not like you're getting a reimbursement from downstate, it's just on the county.
okay. I'd like to know how much an individual business costs. $50. A business license is $50? Yes.
Well, that's the base fee, it depends on.
So, on the fund line for business licenses, it's being raised by $15,000, which means we would be expecting 300 new business licenses if they're $50 apiece. That's not likely. And I also would like to know, what is a vacant property registration and who pays that money? We got $900 in 2024, but we're expecting $10,000 in 2025. I don't know what the tipping fee is at all. I have no idea. I'd like to know what that is. And then we have a miscellaneous line that says we're going to get $350,000. What's that?
Do I need to address that at this point, or when we go
Just
through?
before the budget is voted on.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I just have a few expense questions, because I actually do have a real job. There's a transfer outline of $320,000. We need to know what that is as well. And engineering services, it says $20,000. However, on the 18th of June, the board approved $85,000 for engineering. And there's $150,000 in for a remodel of the police station. And I'd like to know if that has come before the board for approval. And that's the end of my budget questions. Now I have another question, just for clarification. In last meeting, Dave, you asked for permission for $85,000 in engineering for which you had gotten a grant for the walking path behind our pool, and that's not the same $85,000. For a walking path behind our pool to go into Homewood. And I think you said it's a 3-year grant? Or you would get it over, or you would get 85 this year, 85 next year, and 85 next
No,
year?
it's a one-shot $75,000
Oh, 75.
grant from the county.
Okay. So, but is that grant simply for the engineering?
Yes.
So if any of the work that you guys engineer needs to be done, we have to pay for that?
The idea is to get the engineering done and then ask the county for money for construction.
Okay. So, and if the county doesn't give us the money, then Robertson just got a windfall?
Well,
It's fine, it's fine. I don't mind.
keep looking for grants, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think the village would want to pay that out of pocket, but that's up to the board.
Okay. All right, well, that's the end of my questions. Thank you, guys.
8 p.m. And when I got outside in the foyer and outside the building, there were 2 police cars and 3 police officers. And I'm wondering, who called the police that evening? Yes. Yeah, I talked to Officer Willette, and he said they were summoned. So the point I'm making is, with those 2 police cars and 3 officers on this side of the tracks, if a train would have come and that shooting would have happened at the liquor store, who would have responded? So the police should never be used politically and called on the citizens for simply attending a meeting and expressing their concerns. Would you agree with that statement? Because if you're going to try to use the police or fire or public works against its citizens, that's terrible government. Okay, so my other comment is about the budget too. Okay? So, I want everyone to be aware of that. I've talked to several people who have between $500 and $600 a month increases in their budget because of their property taxes. So, no budget should be approved without the approval and consent of the people. As a matter of fact, in our budget ordinance, we've already, the way the timeline works is on January 15th, which is phase 5, a public meeting shall be held on the budget for community input. Has there been any community input to this budget? Yes. Okay. All right. So, I recommend that we catch up and have that public meeting. I'd also like to ask that instead of doing the same old tired spreadsheets, we've seen the Excel sheets. I saw them for 4 years when I sat there, and it's the same Excel sheet. That we do something a little different. How about we have a participatory budget where the people have input? How about a zero-based budget when every department has to vouch for every penny they're asking for? How about using some outcome-based budgeting? How about we invest in some technology that can streamline government operations? When I sat there, I did a budget using AI. It only took 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Put the data in, and it'll tell you whatever you want to know. If income goes up, if income goes down, expenses go up, expenses go down. So, what I'd like is that no budget be passed without the full consideration of the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The budget is only for discussion tonight, it's not for a vote.
My name is Cheryl Ashford, and I live at 421 Minerva. The reason that I come to the meeting tonight is there were things that were said in the August 20th meeting that really concerned me. It was expressed that there's an overgrowth on my property, and at the southeast corner, that is bothering my neighbor. We have in the corner, the southeast corner of our property, we have an elm tree, we have 2 mulberry trees, and we have grapevines. We've had our trees trimmed over the time that we've been here in Glenwood, and we've lived here since 2005. We didn't realize that we were having a problem with our neighbor until I viewed one of the Zoom meetings. And so, as of 2010, we started getting a lot of, there was a lot of verbs back and forth. We had our trees trimmed, and the Myers had the tree trimmed also, but they put all of the things that they trim off the tree on our property, which was, I thought my husband's head was going to pop off. But we don't feel that it's our responsibility to trim a tree as it overhangs. We can cut back the limbs, do our due diligence so that it remains neat. But we don't have weeds. We only have a maple tree, 2 mulberries, and the grapevines. Since our discourse with this situation, we've had the police called out anonymously over and over and over again since 2010 because my dog is barking. He's a nuisance barker. The police come out, they sit in front of the house, and they say, because we asked them, why are you here? Our dog is not barking. They came out so often they didn't ring the bell. They would just sit in the front and say the dog is not barking, the dog is not causing a problem. That's probably recorded as they've come out. Between our 2 neighbors, the one on the southeast corner and then another neighbor on the northwest corner who says that he has the same problem with us. We have one tree that grows on the northwest corner. It's a flowering cherry tree, I believe. It does not fruit, it just gives really pretty flowers. We've had my neighbor tell my workers that was putting up a fence that it was okay to cut our tree. The limb that they cut was this big. My husband, my family, and I, we would take pictures in front of that tree because it was a beautiful bloom in the springtime. And so now the tree is sparse. We don't take the same pictures because you can't position yourself the same way. But saying that to say that we did not give them permission to do it, they've cut our tree a few times. And we tell them, the last time this young lady asked me could she cut our tree, I told her, I don't want you to cut the tree. If you want to cut whatever is overhanging to your property, it's okay if you do that. She was insistent. I said, no, please don't cut our tree. She said, well, I've talked with Wally and he would like to come out. She met with Wally. Wally, I called him on the phone and he says, I told her, your tree is not overhanging. There's nothing that needs to be cut. She told her tree trimmer to just pull the tree and you could pull the limb and cut it and it's okay. We've gone back and forth between these 2 families to the point that it's no longer comfortable. It's just not comfortable any longer. We were told that we have, because of the berries from the mulberries, that we have rodents. Well, when we moved into the house, there was maybe 5 or 6 raccoons. They didn't do any damage, so it didn't bother me. They would crawl under our pool workings and live. We built a gazebo. They now live under the gazebo when they come in, but they're still not bothering us. But what I did, I told my husband, we need to work towards a resolve with this. And so we've caught in a cage with fruit and other things 2 raccoons and 1 raccoon that was dying because he'd been poisoned. I would much rather do a humane thing to catch a raccoon than to poison it. When we moved into the house, they didn't bother me. There were 3 pups that were born that summer, and when they get scared, they cover their eyes and they cry. Can you imagine a baby animal? If you don't know, raccoons cover their eyes when they cry. I'm not inhumane. And so the ones that we caught, we took to the forest preserve, we let them go. I was told that if you feed them once a week, you can control them better. You don't take away their need to forage, but you can control them better. And so I still have a cage. We're still trying to catch raccoons and whatever else because we've got a groundhog. I saw a skunk that had gotten hit by a car. He no longer comes to our house. We closed off one section where whatever animal had dug its way through our pool workings to the other side of the yard. We've closed that up. They don't have any place to go at this point. They cannot forage, they can't burrow. I'm not seeing them. This past year, let me back up and say that we've had our trees trimmed consistently. 2010, 2015, and 17, the village came out and trimmed our trees on the Birmingham-Meyer side. They asked us if we could do it. We were reluctant, but what could we do? I just thought it was something that should not be started. If you're going to trim a tree for one person because of this circumstance, then why aren't you trimming them for everybody? I think if you start doing that, then everybody should have their trees trimmed by the village. We had, I didn't know he was a trustee at the time, Hadnot came out and represented himself as an ombudsman. Mr. Hadnot, or trustee Hadnot at the time, decided to chastise me because I was not in agreement with what he was saying. And so he was loud, my neighbors are hollering, and it became too much. And we've dealt with this for a few years now, where we have people that are so upset with us because of a tree overhanging. I think that most people that have any trees that overhang to their property, you cut it back. You know, we have a neighbor on the northwest corner of our house, has a big tree overhangs our pool. We trim it because that's all we can do, because that's our recourse. It's our property, we trim it.
Madam, can I ask you a question? I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Cheryl Hansford, Cheryl Jolly Hansford.
Hansford?
Hansford, yes.
Okay, Hansford. Explanation, 2 questions. Just to be sure that I thank you for coming, because this conversation has been, I've been on the board almost 8 years now, and it's been happening just as long as I've been here. So I
We
appreciate
didn't realize it was such a problem.
Yeah, so, and that's what was my first question. I heard you mention that you didn't realize this was a problem until you saw the board meeting, until you saw it on Zoom. So my understanding is we've had our chief, both chiefs, our building inspector, the mayor, a number of officials have come out and expressed their concern. So I just wanted to be clear about when you found out this was an issue.
You can say that it's a weed.
Who?
You can say that it's a weed, that it's an overgrowth of weed. We were told that we had poison ivy, that we had a Virginia creeper. And so I don't know what they have expressed as they're saying they've seen, but I know that when I go behind my gazebo and I'm just taking regular clippers and cutting down ivy, it's grapevines. My grapevine base is about this thick now. Our trees are happy. They fruit, mulberry trees. We eat mulberries because they're good for you. They're an antioxidant. And so I can't speak to what someone else is saying, because when Building Inspector Welch came out, they weren't very happy with my neighbors. They were doing this to placate them. And so it wasn't said at all that they were trimming on our side because we had weeds. We didn't get a door knocker or whatever you call the citation that they put out. We haven't gotten that. It's obvious that they're Concord grapes because they're purple.
So, thank you for that. I just wanted to be clear on when you understood this to be an issue, because like I said, it's been before this board for over 8 years now.
And the times that they've come out was in 2015, in 2017, and it's always the same thing that it's expressed. They want to cut it straight up. They've even cut our cedar tree straight up.
So, and then I appreciate that. And then my second question to you is, so that I understand clearly, because again, this is the first time we've seen you here, it's your disposition that should not be your responsibility to maintain overgrowth from a tree that derives from your property?
We should not be responsible for the tree overhanging
The overgrowth
over to their property.
from the tree on your property, you should be responsible for the overgrowth.
Yeah, and so maybe I need clarification as to what the village rules are. Because I've always understood that trees are going to grow. You know, some of them hang lower than others. I've asked my neighbor that's directly to the south of me, is my tree bothering me? Is it okay where it is? It's 6 feet off the ground. He's like, no. It's
And I appreciate that because, I mean, I live butted behind a neighbor and they have a large tree. I have a large tree in my backyard. And,
Does your neighbor cut your tree?
no, I do it. It's my tree. And just me personally, I don't think my neighbor should incur costs to maintain a tree that I've grown.
You're saying that it's your tree,
Yes, ma'am.
but it overhangs your neighbor's property.
Yes, ma'am.
And does your neighbor find that it bothers them?
I don't allow that opportunity to present itself. Once I noticed that and that it was becoming a nuisance on their property and on their tree, because I have a vinyl fence and they have a chain link fence. I, for one, don't want my fence damaged, and I don't want it to turn to escalate. So I don't allow it to get there. But let me say this: I'm not saying what I'm saying in an effort to, place blame anywhere. But as an individual who has trees and as a resident too, I don't want to be responsible for maintaining overgrowth of someone else's property. I don't think it's fair that I would have to call in a landscaper or a tree service to cut back that overgrowth that I probably couldn't even reach with the standard ladder. And now it's costing me hundreds of thousands of dollars over a period of time. So that's my perspective. But you said you wanted to know the ordinance. Chief, do you help her understand the ordinance as it relates to
I have to refer to the attorney if I could speak on the matter.
And I have one more question about that. When we bought the house, the trees were there. We didn't plant them. What did they do before we bought the property? Because if it's the same growth now, it's been the same growth since the trees were planted. The trees were there when we bought the property.
Yeah, I mean, I can say the same thing about if my driveway was more before I bought the house.
So we're not talking
Now
about
I own it.
We're talking about trees that are overhanging.
I mean,
And
it's the same.
if they were not doing anything about the trees before we bought the property, why is it such a big concern at this point where if you weren't spending the money and it was okay then, it's an ongoing thing, not just trees, it's dogs, it's having a police car parked in front of our house, which makes it seem like there's activity going on that's not good at our house because there's constant police presence. To me, that's a problem.
Ma'am, can I ask you a question? We were also told that you all had been involved in that. Is that true? That you both residents, you and one of your neighbors?
We got a letter from Birmingham Myers that we have weeds on our property, and it was a desist letter from their attorney. We have never gotten an attorney involved.
Do you all just talk?
We don't talk. We've attempted to, and there's a lot of verbiage back and forth, negative name calling, and it got to the point that I said, I'm tired. I'm tired of having the police come to my house with my dog. I'm tired of my neighbor standing outside on her property disparaging me. That they won't do this, they won't do that, they are unfriendly. It's awful. It has been awful. I want to celebrate, and I decided, I said, let me go in between our houses as best I can. I trimmed everything. There was nothing. You could see through my gazebo to my backyard or her backyard. I did that because of her concern.
Thank you for coming. My last question. Well, I have two. One is the raccoons. you should have a problem, in my opinion, with being okay with raccoons living on your property underneath gazebos, because sometimes they carry rabies, they multiply, they can go on other people's property, and they may be cute, but they're not pets. So I would just, advise you maybe to call an animal.
We did.
Okay.
None of the agencies do that any longer. Nobody comes out. That's why we bought the cage. Let me be real clear. I have a soft heart for animals, but it doesn't mean that I'm gonna take one in my house. When we bought the house, there were raccoons running around.
I mean, just, what did you do with the raccoon in the cage? Did you let it, I'm just curious, what did you do?
We drove it straight up 394, about 10 miles out, and we let it go in an area that had a lot of high grass. And no, you didn't see any road carnage.
Okay, and my last question is I really do appreciate you coming to, what would you like for us to do?
I don't know. At this point, I don't know what you could do. I honestly don't know. But what I do know is that it's an uncomfortable situation to be in. It's uncomfortable when my other neighbor, Mr. Newsom, decides that he's having the same problem with us. When Mr. Newsom told my fence contractor that it was okay if he cut down my tree, I never told them that, but they cut it down, and when I asked him about it, he told me to get off his property. Get off my property, and then told the workmen, you may not work on my property.
Excuse me, ma'am. This is an ongoing problem here in the village that obviously is not solved tonight. And I want you to feel free to come to the village and speak to village manager and fire chief and see if they can come up with some solution. And they can explain what the law says that we have to do for a problem like this.
Okay.
And we have
I do have a conclusion.
what I'm saying, you have to give other people a chance to speak. And you can't take them a lot of time.
Okay. I appreciate that. Let me just give you a wrap up, and then I'll be done, because I had to answer questions. Because of our two neighbors, being good friends, working together, we have gotten nasty letters of being outed for having dirt and garbage on our property, which we don't have. I listened to my neighbors say that I was a hoarder. This man has never been in my house. In one room in my house, I keep boxes. I keep boxes of things that I am donating. I found that it's easier to keep them stacked until I'm getting them out. And so you can't see into that room unless you're on a ladder. And again, this man has never been in my house, so that offended me. I've had this man, as I'm driving 394, jump in front of me. I tried to get out of the passing lane, get in the other lane, he jumped in front of me. I tried to then go back to the other lane, he jumped in front of me. I'm afraid. And when you have someone that is constantly doing what they want to do to your property and they live right next door, I'm afraid. And so, in conclusion, I love Glenwood. The thing that got me to Glenwood when I first came out with my wheelchair was there were African American children playing, not reserved, not only staying on their property, they were out playing and having a good time. And I thought that was wonderful. I work for the public school system, and so I want to see kids grow, develop, be able to make up their own games like we did when we were kids. I love Glenwood. I don't want to have to leave because I'm afraid of my neighbors. I don't want to have to leave because my neighbors get the attention that they need, and I'm lambasted, so to speak. I'm talked about, and it's not comfortable. So thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Mr. Chair,
Also, just for clarification, Attorney John, could you enlighten us again with the ordinance?
well, it's not so much an ordinance, it's a state statute that does allow an owner of property to trim overgrowth from a neighbor's property that grows over their property. So they have to have that right by state statute. But the other side of that statute is that if what it takes to trim that overgrowth does such damage to the tree on the other side, they can be found responsible for killing the tree too. So statute goes both ways.
We trimmed our tree back to the extent that there was a third of the berries on the ground this year. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to let the board know that I did receive a letter on behalf of Deborah Birmingham on September the 12th, I believe, from an attorney which has been forwarded to John Donovan.
Evening, sir.
Deals, 307 South America. I just heard the lady speak, and I want to look at the issue of the animals that we have on Minerva, Dante. When the trucking companies came in on Cottage Grove and they excavated that land for truck and trailer parking, we had an influx of skunks, raccoons, and animals that live in the wild to come on Minerva and into the areas surrounding, between Cottage Grove really, and Dante. We have skunks. I've been here since 1977. Very seldom did you see skunks. We have skunks come into the yard, etc. I don't blame them because they got forced out of their natural habitat. But we need to get a control on some of the animals that we have. We also have an influx of cats. People feed animals. You're not supposed to feed animals. The Forest Preserve people will tell you the animals do fine, they're part of the ecosystem, and they can survive on their own. We've got people feeding them. I think what we really need to look at, when we had Paul was a major help. Paul was our officer that dealt with animals. And what Paul would do, Paul would encourage people to do the right thing with the animals. Also, Paul had no problem picking up stray dogs, picking up stray cats, picking up anything, and removing them. Plus, he could give you advice, because when you have raccoons, they will get into your attic, they will get into your garage, they will have babies up in the attic, and they will destroy and eventually they'll come to your facility. So I've had to have animal people come out and remove animals. But what I really think is we need an officer. There was an incident, I called the police department. There were two dogs. I don't know what particular breed they were, but I had to go over into the park with my vehicle because these two dogs had two people who walked around the park upset. I called the police, I got the dispatcher. I don't think, it wasn't the Glenwood dispatcher, but the dog, nobody came. I stayed with those people until they felt it was safe to leave. So we really need to look at the control officer in this village because we have problems. People are supposed to have their pets licensed by the village. I think it's $2, if I'm not mistaken. $2, that's a small, pretty kick about $2. But you don't see the licensing. So it's getting out of hand. So I think that we need to do some enforcement, but I think we also need to look at having an officer and or not necessarily a full-time officer, but an officer there to assist people in situations and get these animals under control. Because we're moving them out of their habitat, can't blame the animals. We're at fault, we should take care of the problem.
Mitchell, isn't the animal position posted?
Yes.
Posted for a while, and no one is applying.
Good evening, I'm Ward 318 Blackstone, and I have a couple of follow-ups, and then I'm trying to get some sense as to how are we going to review the budget, proposed budget, and how does a citizen get their input into this process? And I know Mr. Jansen indicated this was a discussion, so I have to think about if we have suggestions based on the information that we have, how do we get that into the system? Think about it. I don't know. I got a copy of the budget. I have some suggestions, some ideas, because the numbers are just not, when you roll it over, and when we were doing budgets before, we're 5 months already into the fiscal year. We used to say, okay, what have you spent so far? And then you can play out the rest of the fiscal year. I'm not sure in terms of the approach, but looking at the proposal, and I spoke to Mr. Jansen, I understand the process, and so I know it's a work-in process, so it's a matter of how do we don't want to be here for 12 o'clock trying to discuss line by line, and so we need to have some kind of mechanism that we sitting in the audience are going to hear your discussion in terms of how you want to make adjustments to this budget, because I'm sure that, as you know, it's a working process and the numbers need to be tweaked. Okay? Is that fair?
It is fair.
Okay. Okay, so if we come up with, if we used to have open meetings, that we would have discussions and we would follow from the floor and people would say this, that, and the other. But anyway, whatever process or procedure that we can make sure that as you go through your deliberations, that you have the best input. I understand we don't have a full finance committee. We are not going to have, I guess, this round, an analysis coming from the finance committee unless we can appoint somebody to that committee in short order. But that would be the first step, because to sit up there and try to go through a 200-line budget in an open discussion, to me, is just not the most expeditious way to do that.
Well, we don't plan
Please, not tonight.
tonight.
Okay. I just offer that as an idea.
Is that we have to set a later date for public input.
Okay.
When those decisions are made.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a couple of follow-up items. I'm not going to go through this budget issue, but I'm trying to get some closure on a couple of issues relative to the fire station rebuild. I had it at 1.3, and I know that there were some amendments, and maybe the chief can tell me. Now, is it 1.8 at this point? Because I know that there were some approvals, and I just want to kind of keep clear in terms of, I know we talked about the funding, how we're going to pay for it in that country. So is it 1.3 with the additional $300,000 that you guys considered at the previous discussion? Is that it? It's 1.8. Okay, so the 1.8 is an approved number?
Correct.
Okay, I'm not, 1.8. Anything in addition to that has to come back before the board.
Right, there are no additions to the loan grant. Even at the last meeting, that was just as money is spent and as the vendors are selected, it comes back to the board.
Okay. That's to be funded to the tip.
Correct.
Okay, and the thing that kind of got me is the idea that someone said, oh, that's just TIF money. Well, TIF money is real money, and that's tax money. So it's not as if we got a pot of money sitting out there over the rainbow. When you make the decision relative to you're going to fund it by TIF, and Chief knows it, is that is TIF money. I mean, that is real money. And so you have to consider that in addition to, we'll say, if it came out of the general fund, obviously that would be a little bit more contentious in terms of funding it. But we just cannot write it off because there's TIF money. Because that is to our taxpayer money. So I would hope that you would take it a little bit more seriously in terms of, well, it's just TIF money. Well, it is just TIF money. I understand that problem. And I'm not gonna argue that. Okay, the other thing that I have, I'm still tracing $250,000 that came out of the general fund that allegedly went to Glen Woody. And someone was gonna follow up on that, and I'm still waiting for the answer in terms of what happened to that $250,000. It came out of the general fund, allegedly went to the golf course, never showed up on its account. So that's an open issue. Now, and there's a $900,000 amount that I didn't see in the treasurer's report, in the previous treasurer's report, in terms of the receipt in respect to the purchase of the building and the property on Park Drive. And when we proposed to get the reimbursement, we had out of the general fund over $400,000, I think we paid a couple $100,000 each of the last two houses. That money has yet to be reimbursed. And I understand that we're supposed to have given $900,000, and Kevin said we're going to get more than we actually spent. And that's good, but it hasn't come through the treasurer's report. And I'm tracking this stuff not only on the site, but also in the report that is produced by the treasurer. Haven't got it yet. So we need to keep track of that. And that's
Didn't we get awarded an additional amount over what we had?
We chased the original, what Mr. Moore is speaking of, we chased that for a considerable amount of time through our EMA and FEMA. We got that disbursement at about, I think it was 980, some around there, 980,000. And then there was some additional funds approved by MWRD. All those funds have been received, but they've been inserted into the general fund, but not tracked back out.
Because I remember, I want to say, Treasurer Harper's trustee at that time, she had asked for the award letter so that we could see where that money had went. We never got, we don't know where it went.
Yeah, it's supposed to be reimbursed to the general fund.
Right.
Because we started off with 250.
180 was the first we got from MWRD, if memory serves me right, which doesn't do it too well.
But we got more.
When we made the payments, when we went back to the trough, so to speak, with MWRD, they did come up with a little more money to offset that differential that the Board of Trustees approved for those last two purchases. It wasn't the total amount we had hoped for, but we did get, I don't remember the exact number, maybe 250 of the 400, but all the reimbursements are in. I don't know the tracking of it, but we got that one check because my secretary tracked it for months and months with FEMA, IEMA. We got that check in, and we had already had the MWRD additional funds, and now we wait for the final in that project, which is about $3.4 million from MWRD for the infrastructure.
Well,
Adam, Brian, once we do the audit, shouldn't that tell us specifically where that money back from the county went? Or because if it did go to the general fund, or what account it went to, shouldn't we be able to identify that in the audit?
Yeah, for the year that it came in.
I know and I'm sorry to cut you off, Mr. Moore, but I know you, and I would like to know the answer too. Is this something, I don't know when you guys, Brian, when the next meeting with the auditor is, but this something we can highlight to figure out, because I know we're almost done with the audit. We're over.
What was it, 22 items?
It was a 22 item. I mean, it was a big ticket item. It should be easy to find and see where it went.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
Chief, if you could send us documentation of what you received, and when, that'll give us a time frame to pinpoint it. We could look into it further.
Okay, so that's still an open item for me, and I hope the rest of you guys. Okay, the last point.
Chief, one quick question. Correct me if I'm wrong, if my memory is correct, the initial Park Drive money, we were supposed to be reimbursed at some percentage.
50%.
Ultimately, they paid us out at a greater amount, they paid us out 100%, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I wasn't in on
We were supposed to get, initially, we were supposed to get 70%, that ultimately, when it came, we got 100%.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Like I say, I wasn't in finance at the time that we got the reimbursement. I was in finance when we spent the money. And I know that I read the contract indicates 50% fair market value, et cetera. And so that's an open item in terms of that. I know that the amount increased, but I still had not seen it come through the treasurer's report. So we need to figure out how did that get posted, because that was reimbursement for the most part of monies that we spent out of the general fund. And so that would give us a little bit more cushion in terms of expenditures that the board has to consider outside of the normal channels. And one thing I want to mention, I heard all of this discussion in terms of moving money from one tip to the other, and also moving money from the water fund, and things like that. Mr. Donahue and myself, and none of you guys are probably here, Mr. Clark probably knows. That used to be a big problem, moving fund to fund without appropriate authorization by the board. It was a working practice that any monies moved, be it a tip to tip, be it money out of the water fund and any other kind of fund, have to go through the board. And so going back to Mr. Dion's point is that the accountants can't move the money without the board approval. And that was the working understanding. We used to lose a lot of money because they couldn't move without authorization. So if you read, it wasn't in the ordinance, it was a standard. And the accounting standard suggests that we do that, is that when you have a movement of money out of an enterprise fund, which is the water fund is, to the general fund, that has to come to the board for approval. And then we wouldn't be chasing all these different transfers, because if you approve it, then we will be able to trace it from the beginning. So that's my point. I hope that it's a standard, it's not an ordinance, so you can impose it now. We don't have to, the accountants should not be moving money without the authorization of the board. Be it general funds, be it TIF money, that has to come through. It's been that way for years.
Mr. Moore,
Kevin,
I got two clarification questions. So one, on your treasurer's report, are you looking for the reimbursement or are you looking for the expenditure?
No, I'm looking for the cash flow. In other words, if we got $900,000.
So reimbursement.
Yeah, the reimbursement.
We don't report revenue in the treasurer's report.
Well, okay. Well, that's interesting because someone has to keep track of the money coming in. And we keep track of
But the treasurer's report is for board disclosure.
I beg pardon? I'm
The
sorry.
treasurer's report discloses the board disbursement. Not whoever.
Well, okay, we used to have a fuller report out, in other words, in addition to the treasurer's portion of the report, and they thought we had a fuller report. We gave a statement in terms of our balances and various other kind of things, but fully. It was more than, there's more than the payroll and this, that, and the other. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to have much more of accountability and visibility of how the money is going, because the census was important to have to come up and figure out where did that $250,000, $12 million go? Yes, that makes no sense to me. Okay, I'm done.
Well, and my other point is on the interfund loans or transfers. So you're talking about two different things. You're talking about balance sheet, income statement. Income statement has a budget that's approved by the board. Those transfers in, transfers out cannot be moved without board approval. I agree with you on that. Trustee Lynch and I talked about that. And even though there is a budget line item for it, he did mention he wants to see those transfers in, transfers out. As far as due from on the balance sheet, that is on your balance sheet. We are correcting improper postings or anything like that through the balance sheet, so that the board then can act on that as a transfer out either in the following year or whatever. But we are getting the income statement correct, and by doing so, we're putting that as a due from.
Yeah, I recall, as a matter of fact, I think it was Mr. Donahue, we have to close it out, because we can't leave it on this other account, we have to close it out. Either we're gonna pay
Correct.
it back
You don't
or not.
have fund, you don't have revenue sources to pay off the due from. So that's where we were talking about previously, maybe 2 months ago, contiguous TIFs and moving the monies, getting those due froms off of your balance sheet through a transfer out. We have not done that so far. I did do a proposal, but it just.
Well, my point is that if it had to come before the board, we wouldn't be having this kind of discussion.
Well, we haven't moved it.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'm sorry. So it's just, I'm trying to figure out in terms of how do we get that input to the accountants relative to the budget. And so I'm not sure there's gonna be some new appointments to the finance committee so that we can get a thoughtful analysis that goes to the board before the board has to sit up here and make a big decision on a $13 million budget. So that's my input. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chair, with this discussion, I'm going to get a point of clarification. So, tonight, the board approved $172,000 in expenses for TIF North. The balance in TIF North right now is about $27,000. So, with the approval of tonight and the checks that were just given back to me, either these checks go out or these checks don't go out. So, we can't approve it and then say, pull the checks back. So I think we need to make a decision what we're doing with these checks here totaling $373,000.
So Brian, that's one of the reasons that I asked to know about TIF transfers prior to them being transferred. So where did the money come from? Because Adam just said that there wasn't any transfers, but I know that it is, because if it was $27,000 in the TIF North, but now it's $173,000, it didn't just appear there. Somebody moved it. But if it's for Bill's people, where did it come from?
But right now, there's not $173,000. Right now, the balance in TIF North is $27,000.
But you, okay.
There will be a transfer. Normally what we do is after you all approve something, then the following day, that transfer is made.
So then that needs to be separate conversations, Brian, I guess, at least for me.
Right, but you all approved tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, $173,000 expenditure for TIF North.
So this deal, so apparently so, but
Because the question is to pull the checks.
where,
I would need to pull the checks you gave me back.
that's fine. So at what point, so where does this come from?
So, Brian, tomorrow you have to make a transfer, and that will come from.
And
I would recommend out of industrial.
Right.
But furthermore, with the way that this is illustrated, and perhaps maybe that also needs to be looked at, is that it's $173,000 in the TIF North, I'm sorry, in the TIF Halsted North. And perhaps I'm digesting it incorrectly, but in reality, we don't have the funds in that account to pay those bills, so we're moving it. Okay, as long as it's a continuous TIF, let's have that conversation. But where is it gonna come from? And then what bills are being paid from this, and so much has to be moved?
So, I can go back through the packet that you gave me with the checks and show what that total of 173 is. That's under the column of disbursements. When you look at the balance, the bank balances you see in TIF North, is showing as of September the 12th, 27,000.
So, why aren't these funds coming from the general fund account? Why are we
It's a
moving
TIF
it?
expense.
Huh?
It's a TIF expense.
The 172 is TIF eligible expenses that are being asked to be paid. So nothing has come out of any fund yet, but because we don't have that dollar amount in the account, we do need to make a transfer.
Okay, so what account will it be transferred from?
Again, my recommendation would be the industrial TIF, because that is contiguous.
So trustee Lynch and Mr. Donahue, so if I'm hearing this correctly, when this instance occurs, you'd like to see a resolution to cover the expenditures for the training.
Right.
Mr. Donahue, is that feasible?
No, I understand that
In
point.
my opinion, it's the will of the board. In my entire career, 35 years, I've never had a board actually go through a resolution to authorize a TIF transfer. Generally, the board approves it. It's up to staff to get in the weeds to make the payment. I've never, in 35 years I've been doing this, I've never had a resolution where the board authorized transfer to fund something that they already offered. So,
I agree, I have not seen that
So,
before either.
I mean, but
And I appreciate you.
well, like you said, it's the will of the board, that's what this board votes to do, that's what we gotta do.
And I appreciate what you're saying, John, but the way that this is being illustrated and presented to the board, the conversation that your recommendation that we just heard now, that it comes from the industrial to the north, we wouldn't know that. We don't get any information that says that the TIF North won't have enough to cover these bills, and these are the bills, and this has to come from the industrial north because these are TIF eligible expenses. Those conversations don't happen. We know that TIF dollars move. We don't know where it's moving from. We don't know why it's moving. Those are conversations I want to have. So if these are in fact TIF eligible expenses, if in fact the TIF account cannot support it, well, first I'd like why. What's happening that it can't? And then two, where is it coming from? And I just think that should be in real time. Because barring this extended conversation, we would know that we're going to pull from the industrial TIF to go to the TIF hosted north of this.
Yeah, we did kind of have this discussion last
Yes.
board meeting when we were talking about the additional $339,000 of expenses that it would need to come from another tip. We did not vote at that point, or you guys did not vote at that point to move any money. And now it's time because we are exceeding what's in that balance.
And that's, but so.
So, and again, I was trying to say, can we also approve up to $339,000 to pay off those bills as a transfer, and then we kind of let that go and said, let's get the meeting done with.
No, I remember that, and I'm fine with that, but we need to have the conversations. The to and from, and what it's being paid for, so that we know how the TIF funds are being spent. That's the part that's not happening. You're absolutely right. We did discuss, and in fact, I was the one that said that we need to have that vote specifically to make that transfer, so that the board is aware that that money's being moved. Because barring this, we wouldn't have had any knowledge that the money above the $27,000 currently in TIF Austin North would have came from the industrial.
All we get a bill that needed to be paid is almost $174,000, and then we discover that all we got to make is $27,000. So it throws us off a little bit.
I know we talked about all this at the last meeting, that when we were going over the contractors for the $339,000, our first question was, where is this money going to come from? And we talked about that these expenditures would have to come from the TIF, but the money had to be transferred. We talked about that at the last meeting, right?
I believe as a suggestion that might solve this, we print, as a suggestion, you have on your bills payable the breakdowns per TIF, correct? Why wouldn't we just add a secondary or supplemental report that shows if there's a need for movement and it becomes part of your approval? That way it's not a new resolution, it's not more stuff, and it gives you that report every month. So it should be an added item on that, when you do the bills payable. If there's gotta be a movement, put it down there, and Brian can accommodate that. And I think that resolves what the issue is.
I think that's a solution. A lot of times we talk about the problems and the issues and all of that, but the main thing is the solution. I don't want to incite fear or mistrust or unnecessary, what are they doing with the money, that kind of spirit. Because if it is legal, what he's doing, I agree with you about just adding another line so that we can see that, and then we can know where it's coming from, here or there, without somebody saying, once again, we're going to be like the Dalton. No, we're not. Thank you for that solution, and it's just as simple as that, and I appreciate all of the comments. I mean, we have smart people in front of us, and we did have that conversation. So now that you have that suggestion, let's make it happen. Can we have that on the report?
We'll have to figure out
Isn't
how
that reasonable?
that goes in there correctly, because the treasurer's report would not, in my understanding, be part of that, so it's gonna have to be a secondary component that's maybe under the finance group sooner than later in the agenda.
So we still need to make a decision on what we're doing with these checks at hand. Right. So we need to, we just need to say going forward, we'll figure out what we can put on, but these checks I have here, you all just need to say, send them out.
Is that all? We'll move to,
Do we have a, Mr. Chairman, do we have a consensus that these checks?
What is that?
Do we have a consensus now from the board that these checks will be going out and the transfer will be made? So that would be
It's
yes.
simple, already been approved, we just haven't decided, we don't know where it's coming from. He's recommending the tip industrial, but is that what we're gonna use? Do we, I mean, that in addition to what else is, what other obligations are to it? I mean, it's just not about, we talk about something, because first of all, last time we talked about the fire department, that's two completely separate things, but the premise is that we need to know when money is transferred so that we know if something's coming from it, what are the other obligations in that tip? What else is expected to come out of it? So that we know what this fluctuating balance is. That's all I'm saying. Because had we not had this conversation, I would have known, and it doesn't sound like another trustee, whomever, would have known where this money's gonna come from. And technically, we still don't. Brian's made a recommendation. So is it direction of the board? Are we going to pull it from the industrial tip? Or do we just say, we're short in this account, we will leave it up to staff to pull from wherever they need to place it in another account? Is that what we're gonna do?
So in the draft budget on page 14 and 13, there's a line item for $632,000 between Alston North and Industrial Tip. So Ryan is correct. It's in the draft budget, it's there. So I recommend also doing this with it.
It has to be informed. Well,
Mr. Moore made a comment that it's not on the agenda, Mr. Donahue, is that an issue? If it is, we can do a due to, do from, make the transfer, pay the bills, and then next board meeting, have it as an agenda item to be approved. Is that okay?
We can clean all those up.
No, just this one for $150,000, how much do we need? 170? Or 170, so we'll book it as a due to, do from between the two tips, and then that next board meeting, have it as an agenda item for 170,000 as an approval.
But the buildings will have to be paid tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll book it as a due to, do from, and then release that due to, do from as a transfer and transfer out at the next board meeting when it's on the agenda.
but if, to that point, if that had been presented to the board tonight, then the approval to that account to make it sufficient enough to cover that wouldn't be an issue. So now we're kind of behind the eight ball, but it's already been
Well,
approved.
but state statute gives you the ability to do contiguous to transfer.
But I'm saying is, we talk about accounting practices and just doing things properly. If we need to move money to pay bills, now let's have a conversation about where it needs to come from to move that money when we pay the bill before we vote on it. Not after the fact.
Right, but that goes back to having the budget approved and then giving authority to the village administrator and finance director, the ability to make those transfers without having to go over the board because it is already approved and it's contiguous.
Now, what?
Alright, so now go back to your budget. If you have a budget ordinance in place that you already approved with the transfer in, transfer out, you already approved it, correct?
I don't know what's that word.
You do it annually, the budget ordinance, previous draft, you do have 2 line items covering this amount.
Next item is communications from the mayor's office. Can I have a motion for the table of appointments?
Trustee Roll and Trustee Taylor. Trustee Brown.
Yes.
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Trustee Lynch. Trustee Roll. Trustee Taylor. Trustee Williams.
We have a motion to table the executive session. To a later date.
Trustee Taylor and Trustee Roll.
Second.
Trustee Williams.
Aye.
Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Trustee Roll.
Yes.
Trustee Lynch. Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Trustee Brown. Before I go, why are we tabling it? Because it's late or what? Why are we tabling the executive closed session?
Because I've decided to do so.
Well, I thought we were voting. I mean, I'm just asking. Abstain.
Because I didn't come to the mayor.
Trustee Brown abstain. Got it. Motion passed.
Attorney report.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. I have no report.
Mr. Administrator.
Good evening, Chairman and Board and residents. Just a couple items. I know we've had a lot of questions as it relates to the construction at the bridge project. Dave and I have been in communication with IDOT as of last Friday. Based on the communication we sent out, I don't know if anybody noticed, but they were back on the job site yesterday. They got quite a bit done today. We have also asked that they maintain giving us a status on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, just to kind of keep going. The other thing is that we will post this within notice. We will have some road closures going on at 187th with that project. So we want to make sure that everybody is well aware of that before the closure happens. The main thing we've been focusing on, I have a couple comments before Brian gets into his report on the budget, but that's been the main focus. And then just so everybody knows, the Village Camping event is September 27th, starting at 7 p.m. until September 28th at 7 a.m. I would encourage that if you are interested that you make your reservations quickly because we are almost full as of last Friday. So it's open to 50 people. I want to say we're about 35 now. So that concludes my report for this evening.
Village Administrator, I do have a question. Do we have a tentative date for the completion of the bridge?
At this time, we do not.
Departmental reports. Fire building.
Yes, Your Honor, looking for consideration of approval under the contract with Placer Labs Incorporated to provide analytical data for the purpose of economic development. This particular company has started work with several local South suburban communities, and they were referred to us to some of our vacant spaces. They did make a presentation via Zoom to the staff some time ago, and last week to the Economic Development / Finance Committee. It's a very robust electronic platform, if you will. They can do foot traffic counts, time people are in areas. They can display frequent visitors and density by home and work locations. Demographics, interests, and time spent at explicit locations, where the customers are coming from, going to, and the routes they take, benchmarking of all foot traffic, market share, audience, and key metrics, competitive insights, and analysis reports. The interesting part to this, and I don't understand how they do it, I'm not an electronics guy, but if you have a cell phone, they know what you're doing. And they're tracking all of the data. They can tell you how many times a 35-year-old mother of 3 children has passed by 103rd Halsted in the last whatever time period you put. They can take a PIN, property index number, and identify that site, and we tell them we would like a restaurant there. They can do all the demographic research on it to show you how many people would visit that site based on their traffic flows. And once they determine, yeah, a restaurant would work there, then they'll take it one step further and tell us what restaurants, sit-down restaurants, are looking to expand in not only Illinois, but in the Chicagoland market, in the Cook County market. The amount of data that they produce is just mind-boggling to me. We've identified parcels in each one of our TIF zones, from the brand new TIF out at 394 TIF, with that vacant land out there. We've identified Main Street, the San Fratello property, State Street TIF, the land south of the Glen Woody, for development. The land on Holbrook Road that we have in the Holbrook TIF. Land that we hope to be entertaining shortly for development would be the former NICOR building land, the old NICOR, in our industrial TIF. And then, of course, on the Halsted corridor, the former Roman Plaza and the theater, the old theater parcel. One thought that I had looking into this was we're most likely going to see a switch in traffic and demographic and needs and demands on the Halsted corridor when the casino opens in November. So the thought is to have more recent and current data as to what might work in any of our vacant spots. So the presentation before you this evening is to authorize an expenditure of $9,900 for the 12-month subscription. They come out and do all the work with us, and then they set us up with our ability to access this data. And that expense would be the TIF expense spread over the 8 TIFs, which have properties in them that we would be using to identify. And if there's any questions.
Yes. So I saw the presentation, it was kind of brief. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if I was actually sold, but I always want to listen when staff recommends tools and services to do their job or to solve a need. Is it possible that they can do a presentation for the board?
Sure.
I'm just asking. While that data is important, I'm just trying to think, how does it help us? Like, I'm listening to what you're saying, that it's going to tell us demographics and things about traffic patterns and people. But is that going to fix our problem with the vacant land?
I don't believe it's a do-all, end-all. The thing that intrigued me more, I think, was their ability to, once you identify, and we've had several suggestions, if you just take the land here by San Fratello, and I'm in no way trying to sell this, I'm just giving you some of my thoughts on it. But the San Fratello land, we've kind of all talked very informally over the last few years about the possibility of a mixed-use development on that parcel. We have somebody coming forward that's looking at it, wants to come up with a design for that concept, where there's some retail on the first, and then apartments on floors 2 and 3 and possibly 4, in maybe a single building, which is what we've all talked about up near the sidewalk, or possibly 2 or 3 buildings on that. It's a fairly, large or fixable lot. The data they could do is, what do they call it, drop a pin on that parcel, and then give you that data that says, well, you could support those number of residential units, and or you could support so many units of retail. And the thought was we would have small retail like mom and pop things, like an arts and crafts thing, or I don't know, maybe a cell phone store, maybe a donut shop, maybe. But this would give you some backup to, are we thinking the right way or not? So I just believe it's just a tool.
I would understand that they could give us recommendations on what types of business would go in whatever sector that was pinpointed.
Right, and I was just about to bring that up. So years ago, you used to go to ICSU, which was a shopping center convention, and you were trying to sell your city. What this does is it kind of cuts down on that time to find out, not just based on traffic counts, but to find out what businesses would be a fit for the village of Glenwood. So where it really benefits us is another place is that it cuts down on the time of us doing cold calls to say, okay, you know, you call a business and they say, oh no, we're not going to locate within that area. This will then kind of streamline based on that data and those analytics to say, yes, these are businesses that are currently looking to relocate within your area, and it is a fit. So it is a time savings for those cold calls.
And they also could give us also give the businesses an opportunity to know what type of feedback or what they are to expect from the public, how the public will react to it.
Right, and then they take it one step further. Let's say at 394 Roman Dagger Road, they drop that pin there, and they tell you, well, the highest and best use is a convenience store, a hamburger, a quick serve restaurant. Well, then they can plug that into their data, and they'll show you which quick serve restaurants are in the expansion mode right now, which ones are thinking of your area. And that's huge, because it saves a lot of cold call when I try to figure it out, because I've worked hard with both Burger King and McDonald's for the 394 corridor area, and they only want to be on the north side of the street because, that's called the breakfast side of the road, because it's on the way in, or Dunkin' Donuts, things like that. So it takes a lot of that timeshare out of it, but I don't know that it's a do-all.
Chief, I thank you, Trustee Rowe. I think it's a good idea to have him come back before the board. I heard portions of the economic development, but I couldn't really hear the speaker. But Chief, would this be similar to what businesses do? Because I know we've heard time after time on Halsted that the reason we don't get that much development because the car count, foot traffic south of, was it 183rd? Is extremely smaller versus that going north. So it sounds like what we would pay them to do, the businesses are doing anyway before they decide they're going to come.
No, you got it right, except they've already made all that contact, and they know if Joe's Steakhouse is interested in expanding, if they would consider this area, and that takes that all out, and they provide them with all that demographic data, because that has been a stumbler for us. We get somebody, we got them on a hook, we get them here, or they do their due diligence. We have that with grocery stores, we have them with restaurants, and they come back and they say, you know what, it just doesn't meet our expansion plan right now. So this will at least eliminate some of that time.
Do you know what the, I remember looking for it, but I don't remember finding it, what the trial period, if you will, would be for this? I mean, if we decided, because it's
a 12-month contract.
12-month contract.
Yeah. Is there a, again, we gotta watch it to automatic deals that we're gonna shake in. Pardon me?
Is it possible you can have them come to the village and put on a
They would do a Zoom, yeah, they're not from the area. They would certainly Zoom into a meeting and give a presentation if that's what.
Yeah, I agree with Trustee Rowe. I do would be nice to have them come to the board if we can do that. Because, I mean, we're not against any timeline. Are we against the timeline with this?
No. I don't know of it.
Okay. Mr. Chair, can we go on Trustee Rowe's recommendation to have them come to the board?
Yes, I guess that's.
Or Zoom, whatever they can do.
Finance.
Just before Brian kind of starts, and I'll kind of turn it over to him, just want to kind of let everybody know what the process was that we used. Clearly, we've had several meetings individually and collectively with the department heads to find out what their budgetary needs were for this document. As well, anytime we did make changes, they did receive updated documents just to make sure they reflected what we said. And then main thing tonight is that, again, this is, I think Trustee Rose said, this is a presentation for discussion. So with that being said, some of the things that came up in public comment, things that come from the board, Brian and I are open to meetings with the trustees to make sure you have a good understanding of what's here and also to make sure that your voice is heard. And then it will be coming back for final discussion and approval once that document is ready. So, Brian, if you will kind of take it from there with the document, I appreciate it.
Yes, so you guys all received the budget. Worked feverishly to try to get something out to you guys to look at this. This was communicated in the last Finance Committee meeting. At this point, I have not received any feedback yet from that. In the end, this is my best ever 3 months of being here of trying to come up with a budget and get something going as soon as possible. So for the incomes, they're pretty straightforward. Oh, you know what? Let me step back. So the document itself is probably nothing that you're used to from the past. What I have been able to determine using our financial software is that it does have some capabilities of downloading data and uploading data using certain formats. So that's kind of how I was trying to proceed and trying to come up with a better systematic way of getting stuff in and out easier, faster, for these reviews. So that's why the format has changed some. In the end, it still has the same components in there, with it being revenues and expenses by fund. So to be clear on that document, on the far left-hand side, you have numbers that relate to the accounts. So each fund is a different starting off 2-digit number within that fund that you didn't know. And basically the last 4 numbers are really the account number that it gets attached to. So to maybe answer some of the questions about, well, how come I see this line in multiple places? Well, it's one account, but because of it's in different funds, you might see payroll on there multiple times. So just to kind of walk you through that piece. High-level stuff that's included in here, more on the fund side, on that first page, pretty far down towards the bottom. There's a placeholder in there for grant income. To just be clear on that grant income, it was derived by the fact that we're paying $664,000 related to the levy expense at Arquillo that's going to be reimbursed from the MW, our Midwest Reclamation District. So that's being an income on this side and the expenses on the expenses. In addition to that grant, we also did get the fire grant around the self-contained breathing apparatuses. So that's an additional $200,000 on there, and then there's about $50,000 in other grants. So in the expenses is the offset to those incomes. So they're kind of, I'll call it a one-time income setting that grant. Hopefully we can continue getting other grants going into the future. So that's the big line. And I know we've had some concerns from residents in the past that we're not getting grants, but we do have grant income in, just probably not enough. As Brian mentioned, we walked through all this is more from the expense side of things with all the department heads and covered those needs. We've trimmed some of that back along the process to get to something that's somewhat close to being balanced. And when I say say balance, I'm looking at it as a net. When you look at it by each fund, we do have some surpluses and some deficits. But right now, pending no changes, which I know we're not gonna have no changes, we're roughly non-TIF related funds, roughly about $113,000 in surplus today. What's in here on the labor front? So basically, the labor that you're seeing within all the lines that are here are putting all departments at their regular staff, so filling positions, and that would mean similar, talking to the police side, right now it's filling them at entry level. So we do need to talk through, maybe that's not the right way, and we're gonna go in a different way. There's a cost to that, and I kind of laid that out to you guys in a memo about what that could look like. But obviously you need to get more details and information around that before making that decision. For the rest of staff that's non-contractual, there is no pay increase in here at this point. That's another thing that I want your feedback on as far as where we go with this. So to put a 1% pay increase on the non-contractual people, that's roughly $16,000. If you're going 3%, that's roughly $48,000 that we would need to add to this budget. The police and the public works contractual increases that are in here are at 3.5% as a benchmark if you wanted to know that piece.
You said it's either 1% or 3% for contractual staff? That's the recommendation, so 1 and 3% for contractual staff.
Well, no, I'm just saying a 1%. If we went with a 1% at 16,000, if you went
Right. But I mean, I guess I should ask you referring to contractual staff. Is that who you said?
That's not.
Non-contractual staff.
non-contractual,
I misheard.
the contractual ones are 3.5%, and that is included, so that's built into here.
Is that the end of your report?
No, there was one other thing, and I'm drawing a blank right. As you're going through this, the one piece that I want to make sure is clear, the deputy chiefs do get all reported into the ending account number of 9011, which is with the rest of full-time.
Okay.
So, as an example, we can look on page. The first one would be Public Works, so that will be on page 4. And you will see that the deputy chief line does not have an account number to the left of it. That's because it's already included in the account that's below at the 9. So I'm putting this in here merely as a comment or a note that that's what the deputy chief's pay is. That's built into the budget. It is buried in as the expenses for the unaudited component into that account without having an easy way of separating it across the last 3 years. It's just a footnote. So it's basically listed on here twice because it's in that line that's a note, but it's also in the 9011, but it doesn't add to the bottom if you sum that entire column. So I thought you guys wanted that clarity to at least be able to see that. So again, I added that as a footnote. So all deputy chiefs and all the different components, public works, police, and fire are going to be in that same situation. I think, hearing from the public that, and I'm trying to figure out what probably is the best way, but maybe the recommendation, if they can give you guys feedback to then come back to me by, let's just say Tuesday of next week, so that I can interpret all that information to come back with some changes coming out of that. That would be awesome. If you want me to go into any other details personally, you guys know where to reach me. And you do have my phone number, so feel free to bounce anything off of me that you want. Is this perfect? No. Is it a good guideline? I would say yes.
Yeah, I appreciate the work that you put into this, Brian. I mean, the budget process is always tumultuous in terms of trying to balance it and be sure that each line item represents that specific department or person appropriately. I personally have a lot of questions, suggestions, but I won't even go into them tonight. I think that this budget, any budget, deserves an agenda of its own. I think that we probably ought to have a cow meeting to just discuss the budget, because budget conversations never are a minimum of 3 hours, unfortunately, but it's just one of those things that we have to do. So I don't have any direct questions, but I just wanted to thank you for getting a leg in front of this. But I hope, Mr. Chair, that the board could have a cow meeting or the next meeting be isolated solely for budget discussion to be able to work through this, if not in its entirety, but at the very least majority of it.
Any new business? Any old business?
Well, well, I mean, that was just my recommendation. I don't know if I didn't want to, I don't know if the other trustees have questions or what, but that was just my recommendation. I think, is that an option, or do we need to wait till the mayor's back, or how are we going to address further revisions, questions?
In the next week, I would say. Towards the next week. Because I can't speak on when the mayor's going to.
So, Brian, would it make sense for boards to send Brian his questions, and then we schedule another meeting just for the budget, because
Mayor Gardner?
oh, he's on phone.
I think, Trustee Lynch, I think that's a great idea. But if we can have all the trustees send any questions to Brian with the why, to help him out.
So would it be or
No, before the next week.
so that would technically be next week. Or
Next board meeting is October 1st.
Yeah, so we would have to meet next week, which means questions would have to go out this week. Yeah. I would suggest the amount of time my recommendation would be, we got the conference this week also.
IML conference.
Yeah, I would say the second week in September, Brian. October as a thought, because October. Yeah, that this week is full, and then we will be ready for the next board meeting. Well, I'm saying the second, the week of the 23rd will be the week before the board meeting. And I don't see that being enough time. That's just my thought. I don't know what the rest of the board would want to do.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add one thing in before we adjourn. I just wanted to offer condolences to the Stager community and the family of the mayor, Kenneth Peterson, that suddenly passed.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, just wanted to offer condolences to the Stager community and to the family of Kenneth Peterson, their mayor, unexpectedly passed.
And to the more, language. A motion for adjournment.
Hang on, wait a minute, I didn't hear you ask about old business. Did you ask anything about old business? I did. Mr. Jones, last quarterly, Mr. Jones asked us if we would consider putting a sign up on 194th and Minerva stating caution, children are in play, because the speeding in that sign is similar to what's on, I believe, Dante. What can we do about that?
Trustee Brown, any signs that are requested in the community, I defer that to Chief Petticourt for a recommendation, and from Chief Petticourt, it then goes to Public Works if we decide to. So I will have a conversation with the chief or the deputy chief, either when the chief comes back or we can have it before then.
Okay, and then, thank you. My last question would be, I mentioned this before about grilling in Hickory Glen Park. Cars parked on the grass. I recommended that we have a sign up that says no grilling. I also recommended if people don't adhere to that there be a fine for grilling. We shouldn't have 4 or 5 barbecue grills in front of the field house, cars on the grass, and we just treat that park like it's a forest preserve. So what can we do, since it's an ongoing problem, it seems, about grilling in Hickory Glen Park? What can we do about that? Can we put up a sign that says no grilling in it? Because if there's no sign and people don't know that they can't grill, but if it gets an ordinance, how would they know? Is that for you, Joe?
My recommendation will be is that we look at doing the sign, and then of course, the only way to enforce the sign would be that there would be a consequence, and so we would then have to have the attorney look at what we have on the books, and if we don't have anything on the books, then we have to have something tracked.
When do we get back to that? So you're going to be working on that and talking to Attorney John about that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Trustee Lynch, Trustee Taylor, Trustee Brown?
Yes.
Trustee Clark? Trustee Lynch?
Yes.
Trustee Roll? Taylor? Trustee Williams?